Bombs away! This is Drop All the Bombs with the preview show. OU versus Ball State this week. We ain't going to talk about that too much because we already know what's going to happen. You know, Ball State's from Muncie, Indiana. It's the home of David Letterman, has his school, and he's always bringing them up. And you know, they bring about 9,000, 15,000 people to their games, so it'll be kind of nice for them to come to 85,000 in Norman, and I'm sure they'll get a nice welcome from the fans. I expect OU to dominate from the beginning. They need to start focusing on Texas the next week, so I'm fully expecting complete domination. I would like to see OU at least get their first shot out of the year and take care of business, because that's what they should do, and they should score in the 50s. So, other than that, I mean, I know that Ball State's got 3 wins, but they got totally demolished by University of Southern Florida, which is a decent team, and OU's obviously a great team. So, you know, no slow start, no being down 14-3 or anything like that. OU needs to come out, and they will, and I have a feeling that they're going to take care of business. I say they will, but they ought to come out and take care of business right at the beginning. Throughout the rest of the game, we can get a lot of players in, a lot of playing time for a lot of guys, get them ready for the Texas game. Now, segue into Texas. Texas is playing Iowa State this week. We all know that Iowa State went into Austin and beat them 28-22 or 28-21 or whatever it was, but beat them in Austin. Texas made a bunch of mistakes. That's before Garrett Gilbert, you know, was the quarterback, and you know he's not because he's had the shoulder surgery and he's probably going to transfer and all that stuff. But well, Iowa State gets them at home. Iowa State's undefeated. Texas is undefeated. Texas hadn't beat anybody. UCLA's terrible, which I'm really shocked that they're that bad. BYU is terrible. And, of course, Rice is Rice, which is terrible. So they beat 3 terrible teams. Iowa State is not a terrible team. Iowa State is a decent team. Iowa State can beat Texas this week. Will they beat Texas? Is the upset in the making? Yes. That is going to be my upset special this week. Iowa State over Texas. I know Texas is talking about how focused they are and how they got the quarterbacks and the offense, and Manny Diaz is the mad scientist, and the defenses and all this stuff. And really, Mac Brown sounds very confident, which does worry me about my upset special, because he usually doesn't sound that confident unless he knows that his team has got the win. But he was that confident last year before the UCLA game. He was that confident last year before Baylor. In fact, he said when he was hired that as long as he was the head coach of the Texas Longhorns, they would never lose to Baylor. Voila, that's over. We'll talk more about that later, because I and Diana told Grant Taft that to his face, that Mac doesn't need to be disrespecting the Baylor Bears like that. Last year, before Texas played Baylor, so we have a pretty good feeling that ended up in the locker room of the Baylor Bears. In fact, it was hinted that it was, and so they took care of business. And of course, the Longhorns like to say, well, they only had like 4 great plays. Well, those 4 great plays were touchdowns, baby, and so they ended up beating Texas. But that's for later in the year. Right now, it's Iowa State. Iowa State's got a good front 7. Decent secondary, not great. The secondary's iffy, but the front 7's good, and the linebackers are solid. So with that, I have a feeling when Texas run those little gimmick, you know, little plays and stuff, that Iowa State has enough, is good enough up front to hold Texas in and make them force Case to actually throw some passes. I heard the weather may be an issue, especially at night. It's going to be a little bit colder than what Texas is used to. So we'll see. You know, we'll see what happens. I think that Case will get his first turnovers. Malcolm Brown has already dropped the ball twice on fumbles already. So he hasn't shown that he's protecting the football. So with that, if you know, Iowa State can get at least 3 turnovers, only have 1 themselves, maybe up to 4, but at least 3, then I'm going with the upset. I would say that the final score will end up being something like, because in order to upset, Iowa State's got to keep Texas points down. So I'm looking at something like 18-17, you know, 16-15, some kind of crazy score. Maybe there's a safety thrown in there. Something, you know, it's gonna be. It has to be kind of a crazy game for Iowa State. But Iowa State can do it. We saw them beat Iowa this year, which is a decent team. They went on the road and beat Connecticut. and had to come from behind to do that. They got the quarterback's a good quarterback, so that's my upset special. Iowa State over Texas. I know that Texas has won in 3 games, but BYU was terrible, blah, blah, blah. Other big games this week. Nebraska at Wisconsin. Obviously, I'm rooting for Nebraska. I'm rooting for the old, Big 8 conference, not just Big 12. I'm rooting for them from the old Big 8. I'm going to root for them at least this year, their first year in the Big 10. Because to me, they're like a Big 12 representative in the Big 10. They're like one of us right now. Yeah, I know they left and all that. But I would like to see them win the Big 10 just to say, hey, Big 12 football, this is what you get when you invite us in your conference. We already know that Colorado's going to bend over at any passing win because they're terrible. So they got no shot. Colorado's got no shot to do that. But Nebraska does. Now, is that the same for when A&M leaves to go to Southeastern Conference next year? Hell no, man. I hope they lose every single game because that's a different ballgame. I never liked the Aggies. I've never liked them ever. They've always been the team out of all the teams in the conference that I wanted to see lose above all else. So, and I know for a lot of you guys it's Oklahoma State, and I can understand the feeling. But when you're living in Texas, there's no greater poser, there's no greater loser than Texas A&M. And they have all the nut grabbing traditions, no female cheerleaders. It's all dog crap. And so I always root for them to lose. And so when they go to the Southeastern Conference, I hope they get hammered every single week. I hope Vanderbilt bends them over and takes them to lunch. I hope that Kentucky whips them. Speaking of Kentucky, they're playing LSU. It's enough said. LSU's going to kill them. So the big game for LSU is the next week where Florida comes into town. Back to Nebraska and Wisconsin. Do I think Nebraska can win the game? They're 9.5 underdog at Wisconsin. Wisconsin's got the Wilson quarterback. They're jumping up for joy. All this stuff. They're fired up. Madison's got going crazy. But upset special, baby. I'm seeing Nebraska's over Wisconsin. That's 2 this week. I've got Iowa State. I've got Nebraska. Both. One's at home. One's on the road. One's the big game of the week. Nebraska and Wisconsin. Another big game. Alabama, Florida. Alabama's favored at the Swamp. Now, I don't trust Brantley, the quarterback from Florida. In fact, he's terrible. But he's better than Gilbert. But I do trust the speed and the athletes that Florida has to get some breakaways against the Bama defense. And I really don't know what Bama's got at quarterback. I mean, they beat Arkansas pretty soundly last week, but it was like a punt return, interception, whatever. It was a bunch of, not garbage TDs, but it wasn't generated by the offense. So I am saying upset special number 3. That's 3 this week. I got Florida over Alabama. I've got Nebraska over Wisconsin. And I got Iowa State over Texas. So that's 3 this week. Some of the other big games that are going on this week that I'd like to touch upon other than those. Well, there's the South Florida-Pittsburgh game. I figure that South Florida's going to take them. I just think that they're on a good roll. Pittsburgh, I mean, yeah, they look pretty good against Notre Dame. But they kind of choked it away, and I don't know how. They can either go one or the other. Pittsburgh can either come out and play a great game in remorse for that loss, or they're going to lay down for South Florida. I think it is at Pitt, so South Florida better watch out, and they better bring their A game in order to win that game. But I feel that South Florida's going to win. I don't think even that's an upset. So, who else is? What other games are this week? Let's see. Oklahoma State. Who's Oklahoma State? Hey, by the way, I got to give Oklahoma State credit. Didn't talk about it in the recap. They went down to the Aggies. They were down 20-3 at halftime. Got to give them full credit for coming back at half and then beating the Aggies 30-29. Whedon looks good. Blackman looks good. Yeah, that unfortunate play where he fumbled it out of the end zone. Hey, I'm not one that's going to say he's a punk and all that crap that I saw on the board. I think he's a competitor. He's a tough player. I think he was just trying, to bring. It looked like he was actually trying to tuck the ball up, and he, since he already had it in one hand, he'd probably been just better off carrying it in one hand, carrying it to the end zone. It looked like he kind of tried to tuck it up, hit his thigh pad, whatever thigh pads actually wear these days in college football. Hit his thigh pad, and it went out of bounds, unfortunately for the kid. But they held on to win. I'm happy for them. It was a huge win for them. So, we'll see what happens later on down the road. Can they stay undefeated before they get to OU? I know a lot of you guys kind of would like to see that, the OU, Oklahoma State 11-0, battling for the national championship.